Welcome. My name is Zora. I'm one of your virtual lecturers with the Restorative Justice Academy powered by the Restorative Justice Coalition. In these short episodes, we will teach you concepts from our perspective pertaining to restorative justice. We're excited to be here.
Oh yeah, I'm Paul, another one of the Academy's virtual lecturers. We are here today to introduce the concept, what is restorative justice? In this episode, you'll learn a few things such as what restorative justice is and is not, where it came from, where it can possibly go, and a few different key concepts.
Exactly. Restorative justice is a commonly used, and frankly, often misused and misunderstood phrase. Long before the violent colonization and westernization of the world, indigenous peoples in the Americas, Australia, and African continent resolved harm, conflict, disagreement, and disruptions with what we now know as restorative justice. Restorative justice, unlike the criminal justice system, is holistic. It asks who was harmed. What are their needs? Who has the obligation and ability to meet those needs? What can we do to repair the harm? What can we do to prevent the harm in the future?
I think it would be a good idea if Zora and I started out by debunking some of the myths about restorative justice. Myths form out of two causes: well-meaning individuals who are misinformed and ill-intended individuals hard-pressed to keep the status quo on pace. There are a number of restorative justice programs and theorists out there that interpret restorative justice as different things. We speak only from our experience and perspective. By the way, we aren't the authority on restorative justice. Feel free to engage us by sending us an email if you'd like to learn more, sort out confusion, disagree, or give us insight we missed.
Let's start with the first myth. There is a dangerous myth floating around out there that has people believing that it's only restorative justice if you sit face to face with someone who has harmed you. That's simply not true. Let's dig into that myth a little bit. Howard Zier, who is an academic that studied the indigenous practices of restorative justice and applied them to the Western world we are forced under today, addresses some of the key differences between the punitive system and the restorative alternatives. The criminal justice system asks what law or rule was broken, who broke it, and what does the offender deserve. The victim of the situation is not even considered in the equation, and the central goal is punishing someone. Retribution hardly delivers satisfactory justice. This problem has been persisting for some time, in fact, and Morgan referred to victims as the forgotten person in the criminal justice system in a study on victims' rights in 1987.
It is true, sometimes in restorative justice processes, those who were harmed do face those who harmed them. In our practices, we support different modalities and cater it to the specific situation at hand. Unlike the punitive system, restorative justice must break away from the one-size-fits-all mentality that plagues us. We operate on 8 principles in our processes, and one of those 8 principles is consent. Consent means you cannot be coerced. This includes those harmed and also those who caused harm. In other words, if you are engaging in a restorative justice process, no one can coerce you into facing someone that harmed you.
As far as we are concerned, if anyone tells you that you must face your harm causer, they aren't engaging you in a principled restorative justice process. But one thing we must be very real about in activism culture is the misuse of restorative justice to benefit harm causers and those who are favored in a community over those who are less favored. Social identity can influence this, largely benefiting men over non-men. A true restorative justice process must take into account these realities and power dynamics.
Earlier we mentioned the questions asked in the punitive system. In restorative justice, we operate on the 3 pillars of restorative justice, defined by Zier as, who was harmed? What are their needs and who was the obligation to meet those needs? And thorough engagement with all willing stakeholders throughout the process. So, in the beginning of our processes, known as identification, we are looking to find out who was harmed and what needs do they have. In addition, we are looking to find out who has an obligation to meet them. That obligation is not always just on the harm causer, oftentimes, the community has obligations themselves. Further, we are working to engage each stakeholder through the process. Because our processes require consent, we become adaptable to the needs of each participant, as long as we stay in line with our principles the whole time. In other words, you have to be flexible.
In some cases, the victim says they want to face their harm causer directly, but as it gets closer, they change their mind. This is perfectly normal. We adapt. Other times, victims say they don't want to and then change their mind later. Sometimes, we may never see the victim and harm causer in one conference. What do we do? One of the 8 principles of our processes is stakeholders' participation is requested. So if the victim doesn't want to face their harm causer, then I guess that means the harm causer can't participate? Right? Wrong. We just have to be more creative in our approach, as the Minneapolis Peacebuilding Institute says. There will be many situations where the parties in disruption either can't safely meet, or where one simply won't participate. Do we just call the police and let the criminal justice take over in that case? Of course not. We get creative.
In some cases, it might be necessary to have separate circles or conferences, where the community is present but the disrupted parties conduct their storytelling separately. Other times, it might be workable to have the harm causer join digitally, while the victim is present physically. Those are only examples, and no one can account for every scenario, but we know this much is true: if anyone is forcing you into a space with someone you're not comfortable with, they are abusing the restorative justice title.
Another myth we should address now is this very popular myth that forgiveness is required in restorative justice processes. Absolutely not. Forgiveness is not a goal or mission of any restorative justice process, as far as we are concerned. Forgiveness is always a personal choice. If a harm causer's goal is to be forgiven, they are in the wrong place. The fact is, accountability is about repairing harms you caused while also working toward correcting your behavior. Your apology should be about acknowledgement and changed behavior without a reward of forgiveness. Don't get us wrong, forgiveness is an absolutely welcomed result of any process, but we don't bank on it. It's a personal choice. If anyone pressures you into forgiveness, then they are not about restorative justice as far as we are concerned. Even if you do decide to forgive, it looks different for everyone. Some people reconcile completely, able to restore the relationship good as new. Others reconcile, but never create the same relationship again. Others forgive but decide not to reconcile in any way. Even still, some may choose not to forgive. There is no right or wrong way, and that isn't what restorative justice is about.
It's also a popular myth that you need to have multi-thousand-dollar certifications and graduate school education to practice restorative justice. We respect and understand the value of restorative justice training through academia, but it shouldn't be locked only into academia. In the current system, restorative justice typically winds up in the hands of cisgender, white, able-bodied practitioners. While anybody can and should practice restorative justice, it's wrong that the people who need it the most and whose culture is responsible for restorative justice are pushed out of practicing it. While Howard Zehr was instrumental in bringing restorative justice concepts into the mainstream consciousness, the concept long predates his work. The people indigenous to the Americas, Australia, and African continents practiced what we know now as restorative justice to address harm, conflict, abuse, and other societal issues, and they did so without any type of higher institution's approval.
Wow, Paul and I certainly covered a whole ton of information in this episode of Restorative Justice Academy Presents. It's certainly a bunch to soak in. Hopefully, you will join us for our next edition, and stay with us to learn more. You don't have to agree with everything we say to enjoy our message. Until next time, bye for now, and thank you for supporting our work.